Chan. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for finding time in your busy day to come listen to us talk a little bit about our product and how it works, in this case, in a very specific environment. Virtualization has been a big piece of the IT infrastructure move for a number of years now, and we've actually been keeping a pretty good eye on that. If you look at our software history, we started fairly early on. We've always actually used virtualization in our lab. We have a lab with a lot of CX systems running, obviously, to test all this wonderful software, and we don't really have enough room to have, I think we have 800 instances of CX loaded and running around on various servers. So we've used VMware for virtualization ourselves for quite a while, but it's a big step between using it in our lab and developing it out such that we can easily support it for customers, because it's not just supporting VMware, it's supporting the various architectures. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this webinar with our latest release, 8.6, which just came out last week. We did a number of things, a number of nice features, but we also changed and enhanced our support for VMware. So that's sort of why we're having this webinar now, to tell you what it is we do. So if you look at, prior to this, we basically did a very basic VMware support. What we have, and a lot of our customers used VMware and called us and told us, by the way, all these other features work with maybe minor differences in how we would support them. So we finally got around to getting into the lab. There was a little bit of code that had to be changed, but mostly this was testing and understanding how we could work with the features. So what we've added support for now in VMware is vMotion, high availability, fault tolerance, and dynamic resource allocation. And we'll kind of go through these and talk about how we did them. It's a little more complex to think of virtualizing CXE, because we have our own architecture that even without VMware gives you redundancy, using our dual system servers, our Neverfail software, to keep the system servers synchronized. That gives us some of the same kinds of features, but the feature set isn't identical. Neither Neverfail nor VMware does exactly the same thing. So part of this webinar is also going to talk about how we want to position this in terms of customers ask us which is better, which should we use, and of course in something this complex there's no simple answer to that. So if we look at the combination of things, taking our Neverfail software and the capability to put various parts of it in VMware, we have a lot of different types of architectures and implementations you can use. And we're going to go through those to give you a good idea which types of deployment gives you which types of functionality. This is kind of a slide we've had around for a while. We've added the new features to it, and we will say that for the high availability tolerance, fault tolerance pieces that we've done, we have only tested these and we only officially support these in a local environment. In other words, if you have clusters spread across a WAN environment, while we know most of it will work, because of the timing issues with having it separated, we weren't able to fully test that in this release. So today, this is all tested strictly at a local level. So one of the things we did that's not directly with VMware, but certainly makes a VMware environment work a lot better, is we added a new type of software licensing. We actually got rid of one type. We used to allow VMware hosts to use direct I/O, and direct I/O could map to a dongle on the physical host server, and that was how we did software protection. We've discontinued that model. You still can use a dongle, but you would have to use the Anywhere USB network appliance. And the way that works is our software actually looks out across the network to see that dongle. And there are reasons for that. We have a number of customers, mostly government customers, that don't install CXE such that it can actually see the outside world on a network. So it can't support the new version, which is software-based licensing through the cloud. Basically now it's the same type of thing. When you start up CXE, it needs to see that feature file. It needs to verify that this is a valid instance of CXE. But in this version, it goes across an internet connection to a software-based licensing service we have that passes back the credential it needs for CXE to come up and run. So what we support now today is, and whether this is VMware or a server instance, we serve both software-based license and a dongle-based license. But on VMware, the dongle has to be external in the Anywhere USB box. So mostly that's good news. I think most VMware people are happy because their systems can access the network, and this just makes deploying it, moving it around, doing the things you can do with VMware so easily, much easier to do with our application now. So if we start looking at the various technologies, we sort of start simple. If you have a VMware environment where it's not really clustered together, there's just VMware servers, you can put our entire system, and this is actually showing you one system server and 2 call servers, so 3 of our functional servers on a single host if you want to do that. There's maybe not all that much reason to do that except management, and also there'd be some size considerations. We'd look at having multiple call servers on there. But we have customers that do that in the smaller size range, and they're happy with it. But it's more typically going to be deployed in a non-host or a non-cluster environment, like the bottom half, where you put each component on a separate host on a separate physical server. And this is, for everybody, I think, a more typical type of deployment. This is still a fairly simple type of deployment in terms of, you're really just creating the system that you need on a VMware host, and now you have the basic management tool, the basic hardware, reduction, all of those pieces. So this is probably the most simple version you'd see. And this is what we have supported from the very beginning, just kind of a simple type of deployment. Now if we go to a more typical deployment, where you still have multiple locations, then you also can do this, and you have a couple of choices in how you do this. We support multiple system servers. So multiple system servers for us are active-passive. So in this drawing, you see the active system server in VMware Host 1 with a backup, typically an on-site backup system server that's passive. We call that the secondary. And then we have a tertiary server running off-site. All of them are within VMware. And the way this works for us is if any system server fails, if the active system server fails, the local passive system server automatically fails over. And now all the call servers that are anywhere around will rehome on that one. You won't even lose calls in progress, and everything will keep going. And then typically, if there's a third server, it's offsite in a disaster recovery or a backup data center. Same thing. If you lose your entire main site, say somebody comes in with a backhoe and takes your fiber entrance cable out, and the construction people tell you it's going to be 3 or 4 days to get it all back in again, then the administrator can go and promote that offsite tertiary system server. It gets up, it finds all the call servers it can see. Now in this case, it probably can only see the ones that are in host 3 because this is just a 2-location site. But you might have 4 or 5 other locations with call servers. It would round those up as well, and you'd be back in business. So the Neverfail gives you true redundancy, true high availability, true geographic redundancy. And in this case, we're only taking advantage of the VMware to host these functionalities. We're not, in this implementation, using any of the VMware functionality to provide high availability. And this is kind of the earlier traditional model that we saw a lot of people deploy. Now, if we have a cluster, it gets much more interesting because VMware has a lot of capabilities that we now support when you have clusters. So vMotion is the ability to move a server while the server is running from one host to another. We support that with system servers and call servers. And so you actually could take a functioning call server that had calls on it and decide to move it to another host. Maybe you need to do an upgrade or maintenance on the machine. The only issue here, and it's a very small issue, is it's possible that at the exact instant when you move the audio stream, so there's a SIP audio stream on that call server, when you move that from box 1 to box 2, you might lose a couple of milliseconds of audio. The only time that would be an issue, and probably the only time it would be noticed, is if that happened to be while somebody was pressing a DTMF key, and we lost the DTMF key. That is a technical possibility, not very likely, and most people, before they did vMotion, would probably just look up and make sure there weren't very many calls on the system. We also support high availability. So with high availability, you can spin up another instance of any of the CXE components over on the other host. You might do this for software upgrades. You might want to create another instance of that host over there, then go ahead and do an operating system upgrade, and then use high availability to move it back. We support that. And that's also something that in the case of hardware issues, if VMware Host 1 fails, the image that you've created over on the other VMware host will actually spin it up and bring it back up. In that case, you would have a short outage while the high availability piece restarted, but basically you'd be covered in terms of it coming back up on its own. And then the highest level, of course, is fault tolerance, which is a combination of a number of pieces on VMware. Fault tolerance does something fairly similar to what Neverfail does. There are some slight differences we're going to look at here. But if you think of, with fault tolerance, you're going to take that system server and you're going to have a copy of that system server running on the other host, but it's actually going to be updated real time. So unlike high availability, which has to start up, that system server is running. It's not actively taking calls. It's protected, but it's an exact copy. So if the active system server fails, the fault tolerance software will actually pull that other system server in to keep going. That's similar to what Neverfail does in terms of an automatic failover, but it's a little different in how the data gets replicated and copied, and it gives you a slightly different set of features. And kind of the biggest piece to understand here is fault tolerance is a machine copy. So it's copying everything running on that host. So an image of the operating system, an image of all the updates that have been done, all the auxiliary applications that might be on there, plus it's moving across the CXE functionality. With Neverfail, we're not doing that. With Neverfail, we are synchronizing the important data between the two servers. And this becomes important in one area, which is with high availability, if you get a corrupt image, let's say you get an operating system corruption or a virus, what's happening is that's copied over to the other system because these are complete copies of systems. Whereas with Neverfail, you got a virus on, we're not making the operating systems equal on the two systems. So if you got a virus and eventually it took CXE down, with Neverfail, the second server would kick in and you'd be back up in business. With fault tolerance, it actually wouldn't work because the other system is going to be just as bad because it's a full image of the system. So the way I look at this is what we do with Neverfail is replication of the application, just the application components. We make sure those two system servers stay in sync. What VMware does is a complete duplication of the system top to bottom, including the operating system. It's a very small difference, but there are some people who would say that for full high availability and redundancy, they would want to put the Neverfail functions into the VMware functions. And that covers you for that one area where you might have issues with viruses and things like that in the operating system. Very small point, but I think it's an important one for people to understand. Once you've decided that you're going to go ahead and put part of us into a VMware host, the process is fairly simple. Our software release notices tell you what is needed in the way of hardware and software, whether it's virtualized or real. So every new release, because we do new functionality and those needs change, the software release notice will spell out exactly what you need. And then you simply go in and you allocate the memory and the CPU, all the resources you need for that host using that same table. We're going to look at a table in a second. And then you go ahead and you install the CXE components on that virtual machine, and there's some monitoring functions that we talk about. Now, there's one thing to keep in mind. When we put a call server, which is the part that handles active calls, into a host, it's handling a certain number of real-time conversations. So let's say you put a 24-port call server in. It could be handling up to 24 actual audio conversations, and those have to move real-time across the data bus. This isn't a memory or a CPU issue. This is actually a data bus issue. We need the portion of the database we need in order to process calls. Now, in a typical VMware, if you have a database application and somebody does a report and it's very intensive, then suddenly other people on that host might see the hourglass because things are taking a little longer. But things will catch up, and everybody's pretty used to that in the computer world. But we can't play an hourglass to a caller. If a call comes in on a host that doesn't have enough resources, and once again, primarily we're talking about the data bus here, then we simply can't answer, and that appears to be broken. So we do have some information in the installation manual that talks about what we're looking for in terms of what's available on a machine, and it has basically only impact on the number of ports you would put onto a host. And that's why I say when somebody looks at putting like 4 call servers onto one host just to get it virtualized, there may be an issue with that based on, all 4 of those call servers are actually sharing the one data bus on that physical machine. There's no way to allocate data bus resources with different hosts. It's just not one of the things that can be done. Once you figure out what you're going to run on our system, in other words, how big it's going to be, what applications it's running, then you can simply go in here and look at the memory chart, and this tells you, what we're looking for in terms of memory. And we have different classes of server that we spec out, and it'll tell you which class you need. And then once you know which class you need, once again in the software release notice, there's just a table here, and here are the resources you need. Now, prior to this release 8.6, you would have to key these in and hard code them in, because we hadn't done any testing for anything else. But now we do support dynamic resource allocation, meaning you can set up that host for dynamic allocation of resources, which means it'll grab what it needs when it needs it, but you can steal from it when it doesn't need it. And it makes it a better player. It works and plays well with others when it's on a host. So that is now supported as well. So if you look at sort of the Neverfail chart in terms of whether VMware or Neverfail is what we want to use, and this will be in the slides that you get, and we have a couple of documents that talk about this. It's just a small piece of where there's differences here. And the decision, people ask us all the time, well, which should we do? And it's not something we can really answer you directly. Part of it has to do with how much desire there is to get everything into VMware, because for some people it isn't just about saving the machine space and being green. It's a management style you use where everything's there, and you're only going to be comfortable if you can run these applications like you run the rest of the applications. So as a simple way to start, we talk about if you put CXE in with nice redundant hardware, all of the servers we provide and what most of our customer uses have RAID, hot swappable power supplies sometimes, then you get a certain level of redundancy and protection there. The next level up is just to take that same system and put it into VMware, maybe just using high availability. In terms of, you have some backup there, there's no automatic failover, but you're now within that, you're getting the good hardware utilization, and you're in pretty good shape. Then the next one up is to take Neverfail and put that into the VMware environment. You get those same things. You get the application services. And then the last piece is with a cluster to put Neverfail in and use the fault tolerance, and you get every bit of protection possible. So for a customer, this is a licensing question. This is a question of what licenses you have. It's a architecture question for what your VMware architecture looks like. And it's mostly a business policy question for how much protection you're looking to put on the system. And we have those conversations with every prospective customer. Happy to have them offline with any customers that have questions about that now. One of the great things about our platform is we are very focused on the fact that we need to fit into the customer's infrastructure. We're one of the only companies left that makes a platform that doesn't have any preferences in terms of, we don't really care what type of telephone system you have. We work with all telephone systems pretty much equally well as long as the features are in the telephone system. We don't care what your groupware package is. We'll implement that. We don't care what your network architecture is. And once again, if you want to virtualize, we are fine with that. If you want standalone servers, we're fine with that. And you can count on us continuing this approach. So that means additional testing in the VMware market. They'll be testing for the next software release in the Hyper-V market. So it's always our goal to support your environment without us having to tell you what you have to change in your environment. So, questions?
Okay, great. We do have a couple of questions that are already queued up. Just as a reminder, if you have a question, you can find the question pane toward the bottom of the panel. You may have to expand it using the orange arrow in that upper corner. And if you missed the intro at the very beginning, we will make these slides available. We'll send out an email once we're wrapped up here and include those for you. Neil, first question, is support for Site Recovery Manager, SRM, available at this point?
No, not at this point. It's another one of those things we're going to have to test. Now, almost all of these things probably work just by virtue of the fact, that we're within that VMware environment and the VMware software has been made to probably do that. But until we can test it. And for us, unfortunately, that doesn't just mean install a CXE system. That means CXE systems in all those configurations we talked about, plus in all the sizes. You know, we're a little unique in that we go from 4 ports to 752 ports. We can support up to 20 call servers. We can support integrations to 10 different phone systems. We pretty much have to take all that into configuration for testing. So we sort of draw a line in the sand for every software release and, you know, say, here's what we believe we can get done. And fortunately, this time we drew a pretty solid line that had a lot in it, and we hit it. But as I say, there'll be more testing as we go forward.
Okay. Next question. What is the minimum software release supported on VMware?
Oh, I would have to go back and look. It's in the 8 series. If you can pass that one to me, and I'll
follow up on that one.
So we have, you know, this policy where almost all of our customers are under software maintenance, which means they get the latest software releases. They have to get them installed, but they're you know, that's part of their maintenance agreement. So our customers tend to almost all be fairly current. So when you ask a question about how far back we go, we usually have to look that up.
Okay, and could he be asking about the VMware software version?
He could be, and we covered that in the slides. And it's as back as 4 something or other for some features, but the newer features actually talk about which version you need.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll definitely take that one offline and make sure he gets the question answered. There is a request, if you could repeat the summary you gave, it looks like on slide 10, which is the difference between Neverfail and VMware.
Sure. Okay. So with Neverfail, you install the operating system on the servers, system servers. Neverfail only affects system servers in terms of what it's doing. And then you put the Neverfail server on those servers. And what the Neverfail software is doing is everything that gets written to the hard drive on the active system server is mirrored across the network connection and written to the hard drive on the passive system server. But this includes things going on, things going forward, not the operating system, not other auxiliary applications. So this is literally synchronizing or replicating the application functionality across. So what's active in the application? So what is this? New messages, new program changes, I add a new user, those kind of things. When I actually go to do operating system upgrades or something like that, that's not done with Neverfail. So what that means is if that system server happens to get infected with a virus, which is so rare on our system, but it is something that people have a concern about, then we aren't going to propagate that problem across to the other system server. Now, if you go down below, what VMware is doing is a complete duplication of a server, you know, bare metal to the top, basically. In other words, the operating system. You're going to create that system server on the host, and then when you set this up, you're actually going to move a copy of that, including the operating system and everything else, over to the host on the other platform, which means if something like a virus gets on the system server, within seconds, it's going to be, you know, because you're keeping that copy on the other host up to date so you can fail over to it when you need to, you're going to actually have that same virus propagated across, which may not be that big a problem. I mean, you might figure that out with your, you know, you get to run your own virus software and everything else on it. You might find it, but it is just one of the differences in terms of how much protection is available based on what you're doing. Hopefully that answers it.
Okay, thanks, Neil. There's a couple of questions about the IOPS requirements listed for virtual deployments. Is there information that they can get on that?
You know, we don't actually have a study that we've done on that. I would actually probably have to involve engineering if they're looking for something specific. We really haven't, in all our testing, haven't had any problem with throughput, except for the piece we talked about of the memory bus. So I will take that one offline and see. I don't even believe engineering has published anything on that.
Okay, great. So thanks again for attending. And Neil, you want to go ahead and wrap us up?
Yeah, same as Ann, I'd like to thank you. It's hard to take time out of your day. We really appreciate it, and we really would like feedback in terms of if we're doing this the way you'd like. Are we giving you enough information? Are they too long? Are they too short? And I know they vary depending on, we have sort of targeted short ones that are kind of mini webinars, and then we have some longer ones when we're releasing different features. Let us know what it is you like. And info@avst.com is the way to do that, and we definitely factor that into what we're doing. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Have a great day, everyone.